I think it's going to be a really good thing for us in a lot of ways. I think it's going to make the space a lot noisier and harder to break through at the same time. AI is going to force us to be more personalized and more human at the same time.
Welcome to Revenue Insights. We're joined by revenue leaders from some of the highest growth companies. Together, we explore how they built their revenue teams, the journeys they've been on, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Revenue Insights is brought to you by Ebsta. We're an AI-first revenue intelligence platform designed to help you close more deals, retain more customers, and forecast better. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello, everybody. On today's episode of the Revenue Insights podcast, we are thrilled to have Kyle Morden, a seasoned sales executive with over 20 years of experience in driving success and ROI for businesses in the IT and cloud-based solution space. Currently, Kyle is the Vice President of Sales at HiHello, where he's leveraging his extensive experience to help teams and businesses streamline their digital identity management. Kyle's previous experience includes senior roles at OpenAI, AnyVision, and Motorola Solutions, where he honed his expertise in building high-performing sales teams and strategies. Kyle is here today to discuss his journey and share insights on how he's engaging with prospects and customers in the evolving digital-first landscape. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thank you for having me, Guy. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really pleased to have you on the show. Kyle, you had quite a diverse career, it's fair to say, ranging from IT solutions to cloud-based services. Can you tell us a bit more about your journey into the sales leadership space and what drew you into your current role at HiHello?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start from kind of the very beginning because I think it was the foundation for me that drove me towards sales and me kind of build myself to where I am here. So my first role was a company out of Chicago called careerbuilder.com, selling job advertising, very much your textbook, like boiler room, inside sales, outbound, cold calling machine, right? 120 a day, set 5, run 2. One of those that really kind of taught me the importance of persistence and building strong habits to find success. But it also really kind of taught me how that can translate into the character that they can evolve from, learning and going through some of those really challenging roles. And then like more than anything, it taught me that in order to build a sales team that is that large, you have to have structure and process. But at the same time, I walked away from it knowing that like in order to build really kind of high quality sales teams, you got to leave a little autonomy in the process to kind of innovate and iterate. So that role led me into a consumer products good company called the Chamberlain Group. Spent some time there really learning the role of field sales. That really shaped me as a leader in the sense that I got my exposure to my first like influential, impactful sales leader there. Had one of those really just like salt of the earth, kind of hard nosed, but like hard love sales leaders there, a guy named Bob Rainey, wildly passionate about his team's success, but also would, go to the end of the earth to defend them. And, very zero politics, full transparency. But what I remember taking away from him was that when you're a leader like that, people will do almost anything, right? And, when those leaders believe in their team, it's pretty contagious and the team believes in those leaders. And that led me into the Motorola Solutions role that you mentioned. This was kind of your textbook, really high growth, high turnover software startup. And that was really where I learned the importance of, really drilling down to what is valuable, valuing your own time, qualifying out. And I think it was really quick for me to understand the importance of the difference between being busy and being productive. We had a lot of folks on the team that had full calendars and were still missing quotas, and quotas went up every year. And I realized that, in order to be successful, productivity is what matters most, and busy can just be a byproduct of that. Really understood kind of the importance of focusing on, what you do really well, and that in that capacity, leadership kind of naturally finds you. People see that you're figuring out better ways to do things, and they seek you out for mentorship opportunities, et cetera. So that was also a role that taught me as a leader to, like, again, going back to what I mentioned with Career Builder, leave some room for autonomy, right? Like know and implement what is the one and only way, and give your team space to kind of figure out a better way to that role kept me in the physical security world for some time. There was a company that was just kind of trying to break out of their old go-to-market, old product mix, OpenEye, that recruited me out. And they were really in this process of pivoting to a cloud-based SaaS solution. Didn't have a team that had sold that historically, was selling to kind of a different part of the market in general. And I came in and really helped them build out a different team, different set of skills, different go-to-market motion. And really, that's where I learned kind of the importance and the value of like building teams, hiring for character, teaching for skill. Um, and then between that and my role here at HiHello, I went and joined the esteemed crew at the Kellogg School of Business at Northwestern University. Got some exposure to leadership at a strategic level, right? 30,000-foot view. What does it mean to help your team kind of see the path forward and really charting up the best course for your team and for your company. Taught me a lot about collaboration and leadership, making sure that the other stakeholders within your organization know how to support sales success. And then joined HiHello here recently, simply because they had a solution that seemed really, really interesting and was solving a problem that I don't think I'd ever thought about in the past. And in my experience, kind of some of the most successful solutions are the ones that solve those really simple problems, right? And so I hadn't thought about if there was an issue with, paper business cards ever in my career. It was just something that we all do. But, I started looking at the space, started thinking about my own personal experience with digital transformation, and really kind of thought about how many things I do on my phone that used to be in my wallet historically, whether it's mobile payments, unlocking my car, scanning into my gym. And I saw a future here where, look, there's probably not going to be a world where we carry around a wallet just for paper business cards, right? When everything else is living in our digital wallet. So join the team here. Really excited about the mission to redefine what networking and contact management looks like. Really looking to kind of be the DocuSign for.
I mean, a fascinating journey. So much to unpack there, Carl. I think what I'm hearing is you never stop learning. And I think that, first of all, having an inspirational leader in the early days really got you on your journey from what you said. And then continuing that learning journey, uncovering the fact that just because you're busy doesn't mean you're productive. And then continuing on that learning curve to understand that, there's never a one size fit all solution for anything. We need to be flexible, and we need to be customer centric, I suppose, in the way that we operate. So I suppose the takeaway for those listening in that want to get to where you're at is never stop that learning curve. And again, to hear that you in the middle of your career you took time out to continue on that, with that structured learning is fascinating, and of course has now led to the role that you're in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to kind of see development and leadership as kind of two ongoing things. You're, there's the experience that you have that you gained kind of on your own that shapes you as a leader. But I think also just really reaching outside of the four walls of wherever you're currently working to learn about how people are doing things, how they're solving problems differently, I think is just as important as.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time with sales leaders and sellers themselves, and the most curious ones tend to be the most successful. Asking questions because you genuinely want to know and learn and develop, I think again, even in our organization, the new sellers that come in and are inquisitive and want to spend time with other departments, suddenly they get a much more rounded view on things, and they're able to service the customers a whole lot more than just the traditional sellers that ask a few basic questions and then jump into, sit down, shut up, let me show you how the buttons work. It's a completely different approach.
Yeah, I heard this a long time ago and it's never left my head, but there's only so much you can learn within the four walls of your organization, right? And there's only so much knowledge that can kind of come in and come out. You've got to take it upon yourself to go stick your head outside and see what else is happening, what other companies are doing, and what other bright people are figuring out, right? That's why formats like this are so valuable as a resource to, learn from other people that you don't have the pleasure of getting to work.
I absolutely buy into that. So look, you're at the forefront of this kind of acceleration for digital that we're seeing across the whole go-to-market motion. So how do you think that's going to impact sales teams and the way that they interact with their prospects and customers? What do you see the next 3 years bringing us?
Yeah, I mean, I look back to where it started, and I think a lot of us are kind of far beyond it already. But look, COVID was a big shift for a lot of us. It forced us into a digital transformation and a digital landscape, whether we were ready for it or not, right? And I think a lot of organizations they did a reactive triage level of alignment, and they got through it. And they were focused on keeping the lights on and surviving. And I think as COVID opened back up, we kind of slowly entered back into in-person. There was a mix of virtual, but I don't think a lot of us have really kind of stepped back and taken inventory of, hey, are we where our customers want us to be now? How has COVID really permanently shaped the landscape? And how are we actually engaging with customers, and are we doing it optimally, right? And I think when you take into account kind of what got us here and then where we need to go in the next few years, I think it really is evident that we can do a lot better, right? Is that we evolved from this place of let's meet in person, let's exchange contact information over a conference table or over a dinner, and I'm going to take that home with me physically, to I'm doing more than half. If you're in tech or SaaS, it's up to 75% of our selling is done in virtual meetings, right? We do these virtual events. The amount of in-person is really kind of shrunk, but how are we ensuring that these teams that we invest so much in the way of resources in are capturing those contacts? They are capturing those leads and those engagements and making sure that we are selling as efficiently as we could be, historically. And so I think when I think about kind of this virtual and digital transformation, it is, have we replaced all of those touch points that were historically in person with digital equivalents? And I think most organizations that I speak with tell you that they haven't, right? And, if you're meeting with a lot of people virtually, how are you exchanging contact information? And I think most people that you would ask, they'd say, if somebody got that invite forwarded to them, I might go see if they're on an email chain or if, their email's in that invite. But what if I gave you a QR code on that virtual invite? They would invite you to exchange contact information, right? And I think as we kind of move forward, how are we setting ourselves up for exchanging information, knowing who we're doing business with, tracking it in a very data-driven way so that we can really understand the outcomes of those same engagements, right? So I think it really is driving more of an emphasis towards capturing, understanding, and iterating based on that data. And we're doing really well with it in some capacities, right? There's all these wonderful call transcripting and call recording platforms that allow us to see what keywords are coming up. But I think we have collectively fallen a little short on, okay, do I know everybody that was on that call? And when I go back to review that deal in a month from now, am I going to know who's involved? Is my renewals and customer success team going to know that Guy was on that call? Are we going to know to involve him in the renewal, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity to be more efficient and impactful in this, but I think it requires a bit of change for us.
Makes a lot of sense. So we talk the same language. I live in a world where sales are really the last department to become truly data driven, and they push back a lot, and they're usually the loudest in the room. But once they see the value of the data, of a consistent approach, and understanding how to follow best practice by using and unlocking the data, suddenly they become the biggest advocates. But we still live in a world where most sales organizations are still run by gut feel. There's huge disparity between how different go-to-market motions within the same organizations are actually operating. If you're running 6 sales managers, the chances are you're running 6 very different pipeline inspection and review processes. expectations of how sales processes are run, what's good looks like at every stage of that cycle. Everything is very kind of gut feel in most organizations. And I suppose one of the reasons we've been able to see such dramatic impact for customers is once you start shining a light on this stuff, you can't undo it. And suddenly people understand why data-driven RevOps teams have been preaching and banging the drum about making data-driven decisions and following best practice and consistency across the way our commercial teams are operating. But it doesn't just because the RevOps team are talking about it doesn't mean it's actually landing. So I suppose I'm fascinated to understand how you see the role of RevOps evolving to support sales teams in better meeting customers in that landscape.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to give them the right tools and platforms to meet those customers where they are in a way that allows them to capture that important data so that it can feed and really support the other teams that are now like closely aligned with sales, right? And I think back like to sales when I was first starting out, it was kind of this very siloed. It did what it did. Marketing maybe kind of helped with messaging and stuff, but it's so much more integrated into other parts of the organization. And I think when you lack valuable and complete data at the top of that process, right, it really diminishes all of the investments and the return on those investments further down, right? So if, I'm dependent on a field sales AE to go out and collect business cards and then come back to their office on Friday afternoon and manually enter those so that it can feed the marketing team that's going to enter them into a sequence, and RevOps is really going to understand, what my best players are doing and not doing. I think, anybody that's been in a sales leadership role knows that the last thing a sales rep wants to be doing is manually entering data into the CRM, right? So how do you automate this process that we know time and time again people are reluctant to do? And that's just giving them tools that allow that to happen, right? And so if I can present them their contact information, relevant information about the business and the initiatives that are important to the business, whether it be new products, promotion, careers page, if I can put all of that into the various digital touch points that rep has in a virtual environment, I can increase the likelihood that customer is going to engage with them, that they're going to save their contact info. And one of the powerful things about kind of a digital contact information share is I can ask for that information back, right? So Guy, if you scan my QR code while we're on a virtual meeting, these tools can now allow you to solicit contact information back. It can automatically pipe that into your CRM, right? So now RevOps is happy because we're capturing more contacts. We're understanding the customer journey a bit better. Marketing's happy because they've got information about these contacts that they can enter into a nurturing sequence that can turn into leads that convert. And, you combine that with the technology around enriching that contact data through AI and getting things that traditionally you wouldn't be able to pull off of like a traditional contact exchange. I think you just improve the top of that funnel tremendously in a way that it flows down and impacts the outcome, in really broad ways. And I think the statistic that stands out to me the most from your report here recently, Guy, is 44% of your sales contacts never make it into the CRM, right? And we as sales leaders, we're all focused on these big fancy sounding acronyms, conversion rates and CAC and LTV, and like that all starts at that initial capture, right? And we don't know what we don't know. And if it's not in the CRM, it doesn't exist and it never converts to revenue. And so when I think about, the funnel, I think about the top just as much as the bottom. And I think by giving sales teams better tools to engage with your market better, that's how you improve that bottom outcome. It's got to be solid at the top.
We'll return to the episode in a moment. This podcast is brought to you by Ebsta. We are the only revenue intelligence platform with 3 brand guarantees. We guarantee to improve seller performance in the first 6 months. We guarantee to increase forecast accuracy to plus or minus 10% inside 6 months, and we guarantee to get you live within 30 days so you can influence this quarter's number. For more information, visit ebsta.com. Now, back to revenue insights.
Yeah, I absolutely buy into that. If you've got 100 sellers all running a dozen sales processes every month, there's just so much data there, and it's very difficult to really understand what's moving the bar for different types of sales cycles. And if you don't have the consistent data, very, very quickly, it becomes impossible to actually do the analysis. And there's so many examples of that. And not only does capturing the data consistently mean that we can actually report on it, and we've now got the insights we need to understand what the difference is, what are A players doing differently to the B players, or which personas they're engaging with at different stages of the sales cycle, so that we can raise everyone's game and make the best practice the standard practice. But also the hidden benefit here is, of course, if you've got, not only is it fantastically consistent if the AI is now responsible for this admin task, because guess what, machines are really good at admin, while not so good at building relationships, which is where our sellers lie, but also it frees them up. So not only is the data now 10 times more productive and consistent, and it delivers the leadership team that certainty that the data is usable and can be relied upon when we're trying to do proper analysis, but also, looking at the data, the difference between top and bottom performers now is the top performers are spending twice as much time selling every day. And so, it reminds me, the reason I was able to be a consistent top performer wasn't because I was more talented than the other sellers. I just worked harder. I just got in earlier, and I had more conversations. I had more engagement, and it yielded better results. And so if we can not only feed the leadership with consistent data so that they can make better decisions and understand what will help things run faster, but at the same time, take away the admin burden from the sellers. Now, we've got to, as leaders, we've got to help our sellers use that free time now in a productive way. But very quickly, if they understand what good looks like, it becomes much, much easier for them to A, replicate it, and B, not be distracted by admin that they were never very good at in the first place.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think like good sellers want to be selling, right? And they begrudge admin tasks. And so how can we give? I mean, that's highly valuable time, especially for your top 20% of sellers, knowing how much revenue they bring in per day, per week, per hour. So you want to give them that time back, right? I don't want to have a really good seller spending 2 hours on a Friday afternoon entering stuff into Salesforce. They could just be automated, right? And so let's give them that time back. Let's empower them to go focus more on selling. And yeah, you can certainly solve that two ways, right? You can ask them to go work more hours a week, right? Or you can deploy tools that really just help you kind of get to the meat of the problem and the understanding much sooner. So I think, by giving your sellers that time back and automating that for them, you also improve kind of your visibility and insights into what your team is doing, right? And when I talk to sales leaders that are focused on growth for the year, which is just about everybody, right? There's growth organically within your existing accounts and book of business, but I think a lot of people are focused on acquisition-based growth. How am I taking business from my competitors? And I think the only way that you do that is you get out and you talk to new and different people and more people. So how can I, as a sales leader, understand, are we on target and on track to that acquisition-based growth, unless I see a lot of net new contacts with a lot of net new activity, right? And I think the other thing that you said that really resonated with me is like, we used to operate by this kind of intuition and gut-based feeling as sales leadership is. Yeah, look, I know what my good sellers do, but it was always kind of the difference between a good sales leader and a bad sales leader is how well did they communicate that to the other team and replicate that across kind of their B and C players. And I think as we become more data centric and we can capture all this information in these virtual environments, that's just going to help us as well, right? Is like we can point to very concrete correlated variables in, like you mentioned earlier, look how many more contacts are in their deals. Look how much more engagement is happening in their deals. You've got one person and you've been talking to them for the past 3 or 4 weeks. I'm sure they're nice, but they're not moving your deal along, right? And so I think really helping them be able to see the contrast between the A and B, other than just, the historic way of well, Kyle said it's the better way, therefore I should listen. I think people really trust data quite a bit. So I love what you're talking about there in the sense of, look, we need those data points to get those insights.
And the problem is big. I mean, we saw from the analysis we did, and we analyzed over 650,000 opportunities last year, and just 14% of sellers are now responsible for 80% of our new logo revenue. And it's just not sustainable. But the fact that you've got, and 3/4 of sellers missed quota last year. So the fact that some are hitting quota, that some are hitting their numbers, tell us we've got product market fit. But the inefficiencies in the way that we replicate their best practices is really causing a lot of the challenges. And in my mind, this is where I think AI is going to become a real enabler in the space and give us the opportunity, not necessarily to see that the A players achieve even more, because of course they're already performing at a really good level, but actually there's a really easy way now and a consistent approach where we can bring the B and C players much quicker along that journey with us. And I think when our sales teams are underperforming, I think as leaders, we've got a real obligation to, of course, there's bad hires, but more often than not, the issue isn't the seller. The issue is the environment we've given them and the tools they have and the consistency that we've introduced or haven't introduced. And we leave these people to their own devices, and they're some of the most expensive resources in our business. And we wonder why they have wildly different approaches to achieving the same outcome and get wildly different results.
Yeah. And I think it's such an interesting problem too, right? Because I don't think that collectively sellers have gotten worse, right? I think the landscape has changed quite a bit. Buying behaviors have evolved quite a bit. And I think what that data says to me is that we haven't caught up, right? We haven't met sellers where they want us to be. Now, some of our more outside the box team members have. They figured it out, and we can go learn from them. And that's a quick kind of shortcut to figuring that out. But I think it's, when I see that data, it really kind of gives me pause and makes me reflect on, okay, what are we missing, right? Because I don't think the world of selling got worse overnight here, but yeah, there's certainly a problem there, and I think it is, have we met sellers where they've evolved to as quickly as they have, right? And I think we're as sales leaders, we're so held on to these tried and true methods, and nobody wants to go kind of change overnight because that's risky. But at the same time, we have to innovate because our buyers are.
Well, we also have access to technologies and tools and systems and processes that just weren't exist before. And I think one of the takeaways I'm taking from today's session is that our sellers haven't got worse, but the data is suggesting that the outcomes they're achieving are diminishing. So it's our fault as leaders. But we've made it this far without talking too much about AI. But so I can't help myself. Tell me, how do you see AI playing a role in making sales teams more efficient and improving customer experiences in this kind of post-COVID world?
Yeah, I think, I've had a lot of conversations with other sales leaders about how they're using it, what it's doing. I think it's going to be a really good thing for us in a lot of ways. I think it's going to make the space a lot noisier and harder to break through at the same time. So I think we're going to have to be a lot more focused on what does work and what has been wasted. And I see this with, marketing and sales leaders really scrutinizing in-person events, and they want data tied to that more and more. Right. And I know this is moving away from the AI conversation a little bit, and I'll get back to it. But I think everybody is really looking heavily at what is my return on my investment for all of these different spends. And I think AI is going to help us get in front of more customers. But I think at the same time, AI is going to force us to be more personalized and more human at the same time. Right. And so, there's wonderful tech out there that will, do outbounding for you, and it'll deploy agents that'll do all your email prospecting, and that's great. But when everybody's doing it, right, you kind of get lost in that shuffle. And so what I think AI is going to do for us as sellers is it's actually going to elevate the importance of standing out and being human and actually having real, meaningful, value-based interactions with people. So I think from just the like, where do we fit in it? How will it change kind of that customer facing landscape? Like there's this problem that I think is on the forefront that we need to be thinking about. But I think from back end tools, understanding and technology, like we have more and better data than we ever have. Like I'm absolutely blown away and sometimes overwhelmed by like how much information these tools can provide. And you can spend an entire week just digging into data. But I think what's going to be increasingly important for us is like, okay, what are the insights, right? And what is this actually informing and telling us? And are we just chasing correlation, or are we chasing causation? So I think AI is going to be really instrumental in that increase in data, but I think it's going to be really important for us to like lean on it for insights. I remember being at a role, had this really wonderful sales ops manager. He built this really robust dashboard, right? 40, 50 data points on it. And the first time he showed it to me, I remember looking at it and going, this is impressive, but like, what is this supposed to tell me, right? Like, what am I supposed to take away from this? And I think that's only going to get, more heavy and more in our face as we move forward. Is okay, what are we actually understanding about what we're all doing? So from our standpoint, yeah, we're using it to better understand the sales process, the customer journey. But I think it's also important for us to be able to break through the noise, and that is understand who your prospects are better, right? And that personalized outreach is going to become really important because, I've reached that point where I don't answer the phone number unless I know who it is, right? And if it's a known contact, great, you're getting picked up. If you're a random number, I need to see it 12 more times, and then maybe I pick it up when I want you to go away. But yeah, so how do we, when we were changing contact information, how do I get more information about Guy, right? Without actually manually going out to the web, looking at your LinkedIn, getting your title, getting your company. So, for us, we're looking at using AI to really enrich those exchanges so that when, we do go out to reach out to each other, I might be able to reference a LinkedIn post that you made, right? Or talk about something related to your title or your role. So I think that's where AI is really going to kind of change the landscape for networking and contact exchange. Is how can it inform you better and more about who you just met?
Yeah, I mean, a digital business card isn't limited to the size of a post-it note, right? You can have all sorts of content and available information about. There's no limit on what information can be shared. So I can certainly see the direction of travel from that perspective. I think for us, we're much more focused on kind of once a customer's entering a sales cycle, and one of the things, if I think back at the most game-changing AI features we've introduced recently, we have our own call recording technology, but in reality, lots of businesses are already using a recorder, and so we opened it up about 9 months ago so that we don't care which vendor you're using for your call recording, but we can actually digest the last year's worth of call recordings associated to deals that closed, won, and lost. And what's been fascinating, just by introducing the ability to go back through deals that you thought closed, lost at a late stage, but actually analyzing at scale all of the discovery calls for the last year, you suddenly see that certain sellers that are having a problem at late stage maybe never actually qualified the customer correctly in the early stage, and consistently might be really good at the med but bad at the pick, or whichever parts of the qualification that they're not filling out. And I think, again, only now do we have the technology where you could, it was a breakthrough when we could watch back sales meetings. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where sales meetings just weren't recorded. And then all of a sudden it was a breakthrough, and sales managers loved the fact they could watch back and coach them on an individual call. Well, we can now coach on thousands and thousands of hours of calls in one go. And we can understand the influence different types of conversations and different levels of qualification are having on time to close, on win rates, on how multi-threaded we're able to be, and so on. And so I think we're just scratching the surface of what can be done with this. But I think that common kind of consistent point here is that none of this can be done without the data. And while it's a boring problem to solve, having a consistent approach to capturing that, and that consistent approach not including humans, in particular salespeople, means that you'll just have a lot more confidence that the data that you're building this new scalable go-to-market motion on is actually consistent and reliable.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I've worked in a lot of organizations where products and other departments are really dependent on the sales team to bubble feedback up, right? And as a sales leader, it's really evident that every salesperson is individually biased, right? They have their own set of problems and things that they're trying to solve for their particular patch or territory. And sometimes those aren't always aligned with the best interests or the collective interests of the organization. And what I've seen come out of some of these tools that you're talking about is like just truth, right? Is, okay, look, product, if you want to get kind of real world feedback, here's a list of all of the times that keyword's been mentioned over the past 6 months, and here's how it stack ranks against these other ones. And actually, this feature or this problem that we thought was the most prevalent is actually a couple clicks down. And I think that level of kind of insight, to your point, is going to really accelerate how quickly we kind of can learn and react to the market, whether it's for the purposes of guiding sales teams or guiding the departments that roll up into sales teams like product and marketing. But we're certainly seeing kind of how quickly those insights can be gleaned without the manual reporting and meetings and conference calls around soliciting that feedback. So I'm with you. It's wild how quickly that stuff is moving, but how quickly we can understand what's working and what's not, where it's breaking down in the process, is wildly important.
I absolutely agree. And I think RevOps have got such a pivotal role to play in really supporting the leadership team on understanding those insights. And I think, when you go into organizations and see that they've got this right, then the speed in which they're able to scale is really, really eye-watering. But while it's not difficult, there aren't any shortcuts. You have to start by fixing the data. Then you have to turn that data into insights. And then that becomes your benchmarks. And only then are you ready for change. And if you try and shortcut, if we forget about fixing the data, suddenly the benchmarks and insights aren't based on reality. They're just based on what happens to be recorded in a system of record. And so I think that joined up thinking is what is game changing, but you can't shortcut it.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that 44% number all the time, right? It is like nobody would ever live with that, right? But I think the truth is that is what we're dealing with, right? Is that we employ these armies of salespeople to go out and engage the market, and then we don't incorporate 44% of the market in our strategy, our insights, kind of how we shape our sales teams and their focus and best practices. And I think, to me, that's wildly dangerous, but it's also a huge opportunity to go close more business, get more insight. And I think if we're leaving that stone unturned, where almost 50% of our market is unrealized in this increasingly insight data driven world, that's a huge problem, right? So I love that you're kind of on the other end of that spectrum, which is like, great, once we have it all, let's make sure that we can really, really understand what it's telling us. And I'm on the other side going, we need to get everybody in, right? Like, this needs to be a complete survey and sample size. Otherwise it's giving us potentially half true or incorrect information.
And look, for the first time this year, we also looked at the right-hand side of the bow tie. So we spent a lot of time looking at customer success. And again, unsurprisingly, relationships really do drive revenue. And I went to a customer recently that was very proud of the fact they just introduced QBRs with their customers. And my first question was, okay, well, which personas are you engaging with during the QBRs? And they didn't know the answer to that. And so when we did the analysis, we took a big focus on that. And we saw, if the last 2 QBRs before your renewal are done at the C level, you are 7 times more likely to open a cross-sell upsell opportunity with an average win rate of about 45%. But if the last 2 QBRs have been done below the C suites, you're 4 times more likely to churn the customer. So our QBRs are strategic conversations. They're not quick catch-ups or, let me show you how the new buttons are working. This is about showing the output, the value that you've added to your customer. And if you don't add enough value in that QBR, the C-suite won't turn up again. And so finding ways to keep that level of engagement there has such a positive impact on retention, but also on growth of accounts as well. So we only know that because we started capturing the data and started reporting on it. So know what relationships are driving revenue at every stage of your customer life cycle. What's the influence if you get certain stakeholders involved earlier in the sales process versus later? And how multi-threaded do you need to be at each stage? And how many days do you want to spend in stage before you decide that this is unlikely to close as one? And there are so many different types of insights, but if you don't have the data, you can't even start it. You're not even at the races. So I think we've reached a positive kind of consistent view on life there. But as we start to think about wrapping up, Kyle, and given your extensive experience, maybe there's one or two things you've learned over the years that have been critical to your success in leading sales teams that you can share with us.
Yeah, I appreciate the time today here, Guy. It's been a wonderful experience. Look, I think for me, what I've learned about sales leadership is just how important empathy is, right? Whether it's having been in the role yourself, understanding kind of the challenges, the headwinds that exist, being able to put yourself in the shoes of your rep who might be dealing with those challenges. But I don't think you can be a good leader until you can really understand what problems are, and really kind of how your team is viewing those. So for me, like I've always viewed leadership as a combination of tactical and strategic. I think a lot of the point of today's conversation is you have to be in tune with what's happening at the ground level and what problems exist in order to be able to help your team solve those. And I think the other thing I've learned kind of through a lot of bumps and bruises is like, don't assume that your team knows what you do. Sure, there's insights that you might glean, they might seem obvious, but I've been surprised time and time again that if you're not telling them kind of what you're learning and what you're uncovering, you can't expect them to know. So I've always viewed my job as like we discussed at the beginning, it's constantly learning, constantly evolving, constantly sharing, and that's the only way that we continue to kind of go out there and understand and win and do better. And as a result, I think like leadership very much for me has been the traditional kind of player coach role, and I think that is important in this really rapidly evolving landscape. When we see numbers like 14% of sellers are accounting for most of the revenue, or this increasing percent is not hitting quota, that to me says we got to get closer to the ground and understand how we can do better. And I think you have to walk a mile in their shoes before you can really understand how to come in and tell them to do it better. So for me, I think leadership is always boiled down to empathy, understanding, whether it's the customer level or the sales team member level. Like if you don't have that clear understanding of what we're out there doing, you're flying a little blind. And I think that's essentially what we spent the last 40 minutes talking about is like, it's dangerous to fly blind, and the more information you can have, the better you can offer directions.
Yeah, and if you are, then the chances are your competitors aren't, and they'll start accelerating away from you pretty quickly. Listen, Kyle, really enjoyed the conversation. Really excited to share the time with you. If people want to get in touch with you, Kyle, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so they can always contact me on the HiHello platform, of course, but they're welcome to reach out if my email is available on this, or my LinkedIn profile as well. I believe in the value of networking, as kind of indicated by the career choice that I've made, but I'm always happy to chat with other professionals, share ideas, work through problems together. I think the power of networks is the difference between average and great.
I believe you've recently joined the Pavilion community as well. So I'm sure we're going to see each other in person at an event real soon.
I did. Yeah. I look forward to meeting you in person, Guy. I look forward to connecting with more of that community. This has been an absolute treat. Thanks for having me on the podcast here today. And
well, thank you for sharing. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. And thank you very much, Kyle. And thanks for joining.
All right. Thanks, Guy.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Insights from Ebsta. If you want to learn more from some of the brightest minds on how to predictably and efficiently grow revenue, then subscribe to our newsletter. We'll deliver actionable insights straight to your inbox. Go to ebsta.com/newsletter. See you soon.